Hi, everyone. This is the acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. It is Monday, May 4th, and today we are going to take a look at Mercury's Cazimi with the Sun, which is happening right as Venus is also squaring Neptune. It's a really interesting combination, and because Venus and Mercury are also in mutual reception with one another right now, it should make for an especially interesting combination of symbols. So let's take a look at the chart and where things are at right now. First of all, let's just zone in on the Cazimi and what a Cazimi is. So a Cazimi happens whenever a planet is within the same exact degree of the sun, said to be at the heart of the sun, and it becomes greatly empowered by the sun, which oftentimes will mean that the planet is like lit up and sort of luminescent or effulgent and, takes on this greater power or radiance. And that happens typically not only when a planet is at the same, at the exact same degree, but also in the same sign, but also down to the minute. We consider a Cazimi to be typically within, say 15 minutes of an exact conjunction. Every degree of every sign, 30 degrees per sign, 60 minutes per degree. So you get down to Mercury's conjunction to the sun when they are exact with very close proximity within the same degree. Now, that's a very brief transit. It happens usually one day for Mercury, and it's happening on Monday. Now, in order to understand what's going on, though, as always, you have to look at the planetary host. Who is the planetary host when the sun, Mercury is Cazimi at the heart of the sun in Taurus? Well, it's Venus. And what's happening with Venus? Oh, well, turns out Venus is going through an exact square to Neptune. So that's the dynamic that we're looking at today. And remember that both the sun and Mercury are also having recently just gone through the conjunction with Uranus, and Uranus is sort of in the background of all of this as well. So what can you look for? What can you expect? I think I have a pretty good list of things that I thought about that might be interesting. First of all, when you pair Mercury and Venus together, you get a really nice combination when it comes to the written word, the spoken word, intelligence. I think someone the other day said that the attraction to what is intelligent was called, oh, what was it called? Sapiosexual or something like that. And it means, attraction to intelligence. And that can be a really strong component of Venus Mercury in mutual reception. Venus Mercury Cazimi with Venus hitting the square to Neptune. There's an almost otherworldly artistic and articulate quality to this transit. You got the idea of this kind of divine longing that comes in through Neptune and Venus, which I spoke about in I think it was part 3 of my series on Venus retrograde. If you go back and listen to that, you can hear me talk at length about the Venus-Neptune combination that we're going to be going through, that we're going through right now. But Neptune fills Venus with the sense of needing to get back to the garden, of there being some impossible divine love that's just not of this world, or that nothing in this world regularly satisfies. And that can really tear people apart and make them long for the impossible, and therefore get wrapped up in delusions and fantasies that aren't healthy. But on the other hand, it can remind us that there is something higher. And sometimes we need that motivation. We need to go, for a walk in the woods and come out overlooking a valley and see this just kind of sublime view in order to remember that there's something bigger and I ought to be living for it. I ought to be living toward it somehow. So Venus and Neptune can infuse each other with this kind of romantic, artistic, beautiful, otherworldly, mystical quality. And then the question becomes whether that's grounded in reality or doing us a favor, artistically, creatively, romantically, spiritually, psychologically, or whether it's filling us with a kind of divine discontent that becomes really destructive and even delusional. Now, when we add Mercury in, it gets really interesting because, of course, Mercury wants to involve the mind. Mercury wants to involve speech. So you can get this combination where the words, the intelligence, and the speech are communicating something of beauty and transcendental or transcendent value. So you get for example, if you've ever read the Hermetic texts, there's texts thought to come from or be inspired by the legendary figure Hermes Trismegistus, but they're poetry, and they're many of them are hymns to God. So this idea of the intelligence, Mercury coming together with Venus, beauty, and Neptune, otherworldliness. So you think, for example, of the poetry of the Sufis or of Bhakti Yoga, of Rumi, and of the soul's longing for God or seeing God as a romantic lover. This really and also, but also marrying the aesthetic dimension of Venus and the mystical dimension of Neptune to the intelligence of Mercury, so that we can find God's beauty in things that are intellectual. There's sometimes this kind of false dichotomy that exists in spiritual life or spiritual circles, let's say, or religious history, that says like, oh, anything sensual or anything beautiful must be of this world, must be of the flesh, and is therefore opposed to, spirit. Or anything that is intellectual is necessarily opposite to your heart. So if you're smart, it must mean that you're not really in your heart. Or if you're a careful thinker or you like to engage your mind, well, it must mean that you're not in your heart. These are all false distinctions. They're stereotypes. They have an element of truth to them, but of course, they're false. When we take to spiritual life, we give our heart to spiritual practice. We are awakening the soul and giving our heart back to God in a sense. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says very clearly that I illuminate the heart from within and give you the intelligence that you need to become to progress in spiritual life. So this is one of those transits that can embody spiritual intelligence. And this isn't just any spiritual intelligence. This is beautiful spiritual intelligence. This is attractive mind, attractive spirit. So that combination to me, of course, is really beautiful, because I've always been someone I've loved to write and I've loved to study. I love writers who can speak truth and do so in a way that is poetic and moving and fluid. For example, probably my favorite scholar of all time is James Hillman. He was just as much a poet and a prose, like wordsmith, as he was this incredible archetypal psychologist. If you haven't ever checked out his books, I mean, if you watch my videos enough, you'll eventually hear me reading him. But where does the intelligence and the beauty and the mystical come together? And also you think of like stream of consciousness writing, or fluid states that we get into, channeled information. You also have erotic speech, like not all of it's necessarily, spiritual either. Like you could say that there's, just the erotic, the artistic, and the intelligent come together, as in, for example, a really compelling love story, or a really deep and compelling, intricate plot where there are webs of people and relationships that are, that reflect all of these different kinds of tensions. This is a really crappy example because I've never watched soap operas, so I don't really know what they are. But what I do know, based on like I had a babysitter when I was a kid who watched soap operas. And I just remember that for some reason. She was like church lady, like one of the women from my parents, like our church. She would watch soap operas, and I just remember being like, it's just a web. It's just like, oh, they're all spiders, and it's just this web. No offense to spiders, love spiders, but so anyway, this can be like that as well, where there's almost like a web of deceit and gossip and illusion and longing and lust and just jealousy and betrayal. And it can be quite a web. And all of this becomes brighter by virtue of the Mercury being temporarily Cazimi on Monday. But anyway, the Venus-Neptune transit is around this whole week. So these dynamics you could see, actually for a couple of weeks. So you could notice that. But just moving from the idea of the intricate and the subtle and the beautiful and the intelligent to something that is confusing, where there's gossip or deceit or delusion or illusion or intoxication and really complicated webs. So if you also think about, for example, misperception or disinformation that ends up leading you astray, something that sparkles and is attractive but is very complicated and ends up confusing you. Flirtation. You think about flirtation and people who are charming and clever with words, but who may not have good intentions. Like a salesman, like you go to a car, no offense to car salesmen, because I've known some people and clients who sell cars, but sometimes you go to a salesman of any kind and you can just see them, you're like, I see you. I know what you're going. I know what you're driving at. Anyway, so you have to be careful also around sales, purchases, delusion around money or finances, because there's that Mercury is mercantile. Mercury has to do with money and marketplaces. Venus is what attracts us, what we want or desire. Neptune is sometimes the fog of illusion. So there can be, sometimes we can be convinced that we need to spend money on something or try to sell something in a way we can get used, or we can use people. These are things that can come up with this combination of Mercury, Venus, and Neptune. Deception coded in straight talk as well, like someone who's like, let me just tell you the truth, I'm just going to level with you. And it's like, yeah, well, when a salesman says that, what are they, what are they, can you really trust it? But sometimes it's just that being really a little bit extra discriminating and discerning during a transit like this. But also allow yourself to fall in love with language, allow yourself to fall in love, or that the marriage again of the intelligence and the intelligence with aesthetics. Also, this is an interesting one, but you can think of, stream of consciousness writing. Actually, I was going to mention that one for the artistic component as well. But the one that I wanted to mention that I think is really interesting is that Venus, of course, is allies and friends and benefactors, as is Jupiter. And Venus is the planet of good fortune and often brings relationships into our life that are beneficial. Mercury Venus is good at making deals and bargains and striking, almost like like creating a contract or creating some kind of an agreement that's mutually beneficial, especially when Mercury and Venus are in mutual reception right now. Mercury really becomes bright in the midst of this. And as that happens, you can see allies who come into your life and empower you this week, especially. Or you can also look for almost like teams or collaboration efforts that start to come together. And I would not be surprised to see this happening in the news, especially around the themes of let's say women who are celebrities. That's a Venus thing. You could also see almost like coalitions of famous people in Hollywood, where there's Venus Neptune represents, say, glamour and the film industry. So Venus Neptune, Mercury Cazimi, some kind of important announcement or collaboration of resources or a celebrity effort or some kind. And also sometimes you're going to see you're going to see some glamorous example in the new, or some glamorous person in the news for something that's a little tragic, or some kind of deceit or illusion that's being exposed in the public eye, and oftentimes involving a famous person. It's a very Venus-Neptune dynamic. And then you're throwing in Mercury, kind of co-present with Uranus, this sort of that vivid communication or epiphany that comes forth and can reveal information. It's also, like, for example, as Venus has been coming into the square with Neptune, we've been dealing with, accusers coming forth and saying stuff about, or one woman, I think, coming forth and saying that Joe Biden sexually assaulted her. And then there's all of these, is it true? Is it not? Or Democrats holding him to the same standard as people would hold Trump to, all this kind of stuff. Venus, Neptune, all the way. I'm not saying whether it's true or not. I don't want to get into a debate over it with anyone. But also the idea that there is something in the news or in the spotlight about love, about sex, about women, about celebrities or glamour, or almost like collaborations that involve, celebrities or people who are in the spotlight somehow, and also potentially disinformation, misperception, stuff like that may reveal itself. And the nice thing about Mercury Cazimi at the start of the week is that there's just a little pop, a little like a brightness and almost like an epiphany that could come forth. So I see the potential for strong revelations or, information to sort of pack a punch and reveal something. Powerful announcements that seduce or also may seem miraculous. For example, we found a cure, or we have a vaccine and we think it's going to work, or something like that. But then there's confusion, and then there's someone over here being like, yeah, well, we have this information that says that it's something else. I'm making this up, of course, and I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer. Like, hopefully something really great will happen, but that there's that kind of almost miracle announcement feeling. It has everyone's spirits really raised, but it may seem too good to be true, or something like that. Maybe it is true, but it just seems too good to be true. Miraculous things are often like that. So you also think about, finally, anything that is some kind of cooperative artistic effort or something like that. So anyway, these were just some of the things that I came up with that I thought you might find interesting for today's talk. I would love to hear how you are seeing this combination manifest in your life right now, how you've already noticed it, or maybe you'll see it coming this week sometime. A lot of the topics that I did for today are applicable to Venus and Neptune, but remember that it's that element of Mercury coming through that should be really bright, and Mercury is the messenger. So watch for signs, signals, information that's coming through in the world around you, or in your dreams, or just in from the inner voice within. Because it's likely that some good guidance will be coming through. Make sure that you use discernment and take your time sorting through it if there's any confusion, because the Neptune influence, sometimes we just need to make sure that the most amazing inspiration ever still needs to be checked with careful planning, and making sure that we're being very discerning as we go. So, all right, let me know how it's going. Tell me what's up, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. All right, take it easy, everyone. Bye.